Hi guys, welcome back to CBS Beyond the Gates. Today I'm going to reveal the secret Ted is hiding, which Leslie is manipulating.
Beyond the Gates full episode Friday. Leslie shows up to the public confrontation with a composure that feels almost unnatural for the kind of shock her name has been dragging through Fairmont Crest. If anything the community has proven lately, it is that every relationship here can be split open by the smallest seed of suspicion, and whoever knows how to steer a crowd tends to win. At least in the moment. Ted steps into the clash with anger that has been caged for too long, carrying the raw sense of betrayal, manipulation, and the humiliating pressure of having to re-examine every choice that led him here. He is done with whispers in hallways and carefully curated gossip at the country club. He wants Leslie to answer in front of everyone, so no one can rewrite the story afterward. But Leslie arrives like someone who has rehearsed this stage. She doesn't come to defend herself so much as to turn Ted's attack into her opportunity to flip the board. Ted challenges her openly, and the simple act of saying Leslie's name out loud in a public space tightens the air. It isn't just an accusation, it is a strike at her standing and a declaration of war against everything she represents. Ted speaks more with his gaze than with his words, because he understands that the more you explain, the weaker you can look in a place like this. He stares at Leslie as if he can peel away the innocent mask she has worn for far too long. As if he can reclaim control of his life from a woman who knows exactly where to ignite his worst vulnerabilities. Yet Leslie doesn't retreat. She doesn't blink, doesn't flinch, doesn't give him even a second of visible triumph. That calm becomes its own weapon. In Fairmont Crest, the trembling one is often assumed guilty, while the confident one is dangerously easy to believe. Leslie denies every charge with a firmness that feels too smooth, as if she is correcting a minor misunderstanding rather than standing on the edge of exposure. She holds her face steady, innocent, insisting Ted is speaking from emotional turbulence, not truth. But the most unsettling part is not the denial, it is how quickly she shifts from being cornered to being in command. She reframes Ted's confrontation as proof that he has been led, that he is performing someone else's script, that he is acting on cues planted in his mind. In a few breaths, Leslie builds a new narrative where she isn't the cause of destruction, she is the victim of it, and Ted isn't the man revealing the truth. He is the tool of a vicious plot. Her counterattack starts with Shannis. Leslie introduces the idea of a stage set up with a chilling clarity, and the crowd trained by years of scandal instinctively leans in. She doesn't need evidence. She only needs to drop the right doubt into the right crack. She implies Shannis orchestrated the entire scenario to frame her, that Shannis is not as pure as everyone assumes, and that her motive is obvious. Keep Ted close and erase any woman who could pull him out of her orbit. Leslie deliberately casts Shannis into the role Fairmont Crest always understands too well, the woman who will do anything to hold onto a man because she knows how easily that stereotype gets accepted. And once Shannis is positioned as a possible mastermind, the room tilts, because the question stops being "did Leslie do this?" and becomes "what if Shannis set her up?" Then Leslie widens the blast radius. She pulls Nicole into the story with surgical calculation because she knows Nicole's name has weight enough to make almost any accusation sound plausible. Leslie insists Nicole is the true architect, the one determined to remove Leslie from Ted's life permanently. She uses familiar Fairmont Crest currency to build her case, influence, reputation, status, and control. Leslie doesn't have to specify what Nicole did. She only has to emphasize that Nicole has the power to engineer a perfect trap, the motive to want Ted to cut Leslie off completely, and the intelligence to paint Leslie as the villain in public. Leslie speaks as if she has been hunted for a long time, as if this confrontation is merely the final step in a long campaign to erase her existence from Ted's world. In that moment, Ted becomes the one in danger. He came to expose her, but he has accidentally handed Leslie a spotlight. The more he presses her, the more he risks looking like the unstable aggressor and angry man attacking a woman who insists she is innocent. Ted can feel heat climb his chest, the kind that comes from helplessness, because he knows she is lying and yet he watches her lie with structure, with intention, with a strategy designed to make people question what they saw with their own eyes. He stands among the crowd and suddenly feels isolated. In Fairmont Crest, the truth does not automatically win. The winning story is the one told most convincingly, and the winner is often the one who never loses composure. Leslie keeps shaping herself into the wounded party. She frames this as the final attempt to eliminate her completely from her bond with Ted, as if she has endured attack after attack and has finally been pushed into fighting for survival. She scans the room and chooses the faces already predisposed to doubt Nicole or to resent Shannis, then threads her words into that existing bias. She doesn't beg for pity in a fragile way. She demands sympathy by making everyone feel they are witnessing a woman being cornered by a cruel conspiracy. And people love believing a victim because it lets them feel moral, compassionate, and righteous. The confrontation becomes more than Ted versus Leslie. It becomes a war over who gets to define reality. Ted tries to hold the posture of a man seeking justice, but every time he insists, Leslie pushes him deeper into the image of a relentless attacker. Ted feels their already strained relationship shove itself toward a breaking point. Not because he learns something new, but because he realizes Leslie is willing to burn everything down in order to survive. If she can stand in front of everyone and reverse the narrative this cleanly, how many times has she done it behind closed doors, when no one was watching? When Ted had nothing but trust and emotion to lean on. The thought chills him, because it transforms the past into a trail of unanswered questions. On the other side, Leslie's fear exists too. It is simply disguised as certainty. Beneath her steadiness is the desperate calculation of someone who refuses to be erased. She understands that if she collapses here, she will be cast out of Ted's life and stripped of whatever standing she still has in a community that respects winners and punishes weakness. Leslie does not accept the role of the discarded woman. So she attacks first, hitting Shannis and Nicole because their names are heavy enough to create a dense web of suspicion, thick enough to pull attention away from the original accusation. It is survival instinct, but it is also what makes her dangerous. She can shatter other people's hearts while insisting she is the one being harmed. When it ends, it looks on the surface like Leslie is still standing. She doesn't leave like someone defeated. But for Ted, the damage is deeper than public humiliation. He doesn't just lose faith in Leslie, he starts doubting his own judgment. He wonders what signs he ignored, how he ever allowed Leslie so close, why her lies were able to live so long inside his life. Each question slices into his pride. And the cruelest part is that the crowd does not deliver a verdict. The crowd carries home a news story to gossip about, while Ted carries home the sense that he just lost a battle he came to end. And that is where the hook lands. As Ted walks away determined not to let Leslie slip through his fingers again, he begins to sense that her lies were never only about defense. She wasn't just escaping, she was steering him exactly where she wanted him to go. And in the instant Ted turns back, he catches a look in the crowd that is not Shannis's and not Nicole's, a look that silently confirms the scene everyone witnessed was only the opening move. And Leslie's real counterstrike will begin the moment the world believes she got away with it. The atmosphere at the event had been taut as a drawn wire long before Ted stepped up, because curious stares and hushed whispers had been circling Fairmont Crest for days. Ted had no route left to retreat. He showed up with a resolve that felt almost desperate. If he didn't expose Leslie in front of the crowd, if he didn't force her to stand before what she had done, he would be swallowed whole by twisted stories and lies dressed up as truth. Ted understood, with brutal clarity, what it felt like to be pulled out of his own life piece by piece, as if someone else were rewriting his history for him, deciding who was trustworthy and who wasn't in his place. He had endured enough. That was why he chose a public confrontation, a choice both reckless and socially suicidal, because in a place like this, The person who loses composure in front of an audience is often the one who loses before the story even has time to end. Ted publicly called Leslie out in the middle of the event, accusing her of plotting, manipulating, and relentlessly fanning the flames of conflicts that were already pushing people to the edge. He spoke with the raw energy of someone cornered, furious, and wounded at once, as if every sentence he delivered was also a confession of how blind he had once been. But he also knew that if he didn't speak, Leslie would speak for him, shaping his silence into whatever benefited her. Ted poured everything into that moment, not only to protect himself, but to end the sickening feeling of being handled. Dragged through a play in which he no longer recognized what role he was even supposed to be playing. And just as Ted thought he had found the rhythm of the room, Shannis appeared like a blade driven straight into his heart. Her arrival wasn't loud, but it was enough to make every head turn instantly. On Shannis's face was the unmistakable pain of someone who has just been betrayed, pain so intense there is no strength left to analyze, only enough to react. She seemed like someone who hadn't fully loaded what was happening, clinging instead to the emotion that had been burning her alive for hours ever since she found the lingerie. Shannis stepped into the confrontation not with the clarity of a person searching for truth, but with the shaken urgency of someone yanked out of a safe world and thrown into darkness, forced to choose who to believe immediately. And in that panicked split second, she chose wrong, or at least, she chose in a way that shattered Ted. Shannis cut Ted off. She didn't wait for him to finish, didn't wait for the crowd to understand the full picture. For her, everything had already been defined by a piece of evidence that felt brutal in its simplicity. The underwear was a stain that couldn't be denied, a fingerprint pressed into her pride. Her hurt left no room for explanations, because explanations now sounded like excuses. She declared that she didn't believe what Ted was saying about Leslie, and the terrifying part was that she said it in front of everyone, turning private doubt into a public verdict. In a community built on reputation, that statement didn't just end a relationship. It opened a hunt where Ted would be branded a traitor before he even had the chance to heal himself. The biggest shock came when Shannis publicly ended everything with Ted on the spot. It didn't unfold like a calm decision reached after sleepless nights. It was a survival reflex. Shannis needed to cut the cord to protect herself from humiliation, from the fear that if she stood beside Ted for even one more second, she would become a fool in the eyes of the crowd and in her own mind. She chose to end it as a way to reclaim control, as a way to announce that she was not someone who could be led around by the nose. But the irony was cruel. By pushing Ted away, she unknowingly stepped into the exact orbit Leslie needed her to enter. Shannis even hinted that Ted might be under Leslie's influence, or that he was trying to hide some private secret. The line carried a bitter contradiction. Shannis was standing with Leslie against Ted, yet she was also acknowledging the possibility that Leslie had power over Ted. She didn't recognize the inconsistency because her mind wasn't operating on logic anymore, only on pain. Shannis needed a reason big enough to justify the betrayal she felt, and those theories Ted being controlled. Ted hiding something were just enough to keep her from facing the more frightening question. What if Ted was telling the truth? And what if she was publicly condemning the wrong person? Shannis built herself a lifeline to cling to, and that lifeline was made of suspicion. While Shannis erupted, Leslie stood in the perfect position to win without saying a word. She watched the unfolding scene like someone observing a chess match move exactly the way she had calculated, and a discreet, knowing smile appeared behind Shannis's back. It wasn't an obvious grin of triumph, it was the cold satisfaction of someone watching an opponent strike their own most vulnerable spot. Leslie understood what the crowd would remember, not Ted's arguments, but Shannis turning away, the pain on her face, the accusations spoken through tears and anger. Those images are always stronger than truth. And Leslie didn't need to win evidence. She only needed to win emotion. Ted collapsed completely in that instant. His shock wasn't only that Shannis didn't believe him, it was that she became the one who destroyed his final attempt right in front of everyone. He felt as if the ground disappeared beneath his feet. He had prepared for Leslie to fight back, for the crowd to doubt him, even for Nicole to misunderstand him. But he hadn't prepared for this, the person he most wanted to protect becoming the one to hand Leslie her sharpest weapon. Shannis' rejection turned Ted into a man speaking alone inside a room full of judgment. And that judgment began to spread like smoke, slipping into every stare, every head shake, every meaningful silence. Yet Shannis didn't walk away like a victor either. She left in a state that was both decisive and shattered. Inside her, she was still torn between pain and doubt about Ted, a doubt that wasn't always certain, but strong enough that she couldn't turn back immediately. Shannis carried the feeling that she had just saved herself, and at the same time she carried an unspoken crack beneath her certainty, something in Ted's insistence. Something in Leslie's too composed calm disturbed her even if she refused to admit it. She hadn't fully loaded the whole picture yet, and because of that, she could only see the sharp edge that had cut her, not the hand that had placed it there. What happened made every scheme more complicated and created an unexpected temporary alliance. On the surface, Shannis had taken Leslie's side against Ted, and that was exactly what Leslie needed most in that moment, a living shield named Shannis' pain. But under the surface, that alliance was fragile and toxic. Because Shannis didn't trust Leslie because Leslie was right, she trusted Leslie because she needed somewhere to put her faith after her faith in Ted had just collapsed. And alliances built on pain tend to burn fast, needing only a small spark of truth to ignite them. When Shannis left the event, Ted remained in a bitter silence, watching her back as if watching the last remaining piece of a future he had once believed was certain. He realized the cruelest part wasn't Leslie lying, it was Leslie making truth meaningless by turning emotion into a weapon. Ted could argue, explain, stack logic upon logic, but he had just witnessed a hard reality. If Shannis believed that underwear more than she believed him, then every word he spoke became noise. And when noise is swallowed by a crowd, the winner is always the person who knows how to stand still and smile. The hook sits in the moment Ted finally understands. Leslie doesn't just want to destroy him, she wants to turn Shannis into living proof against him. And while Shannis walks out with a torn heart, she has no idea that the discreet smile behind her isn't the end of a game, it's the signal that Leslie has just opened the most important door of all, where her next step won't even need lies anymore, because Shannis has unknowingly lied for her in front of all Fairmont Crest.